I want to welcome everybody to the 19th Century Charitable Association, where it is our vision to be a dynamic cultural center for community learning. I'm Deb Hammond, I'm the Literature Chair. We have 30 programs in our enrichment series as a part of our mission to strengthen our community through learning, giving, and sharing our landmark building. Today's program is Mark Larson, Doing Oral History. I am so pleased to introduce him, and he has quite a history. He won a Golden Apple Award as an educator up at Evanston High School. He has had careers at the Field Museum, Lincoln Park Zoo, and National Louis University. He earned a doctorate of education, has written 4 books, is working on his 5th, and his work history is very extensive. It included working with Bert Hillstrom, working intimately with Kukla, Fran, and Ollie. He was interviewed 3 times by Studs Terkel and has worked as an oral historian with more than 300 of the founders of the Chicago theaters and participants of the Chicago's early theaters. And his latest book, which is Working, which was on the 50th anniversary of Studs Terkel's working. So he's been doing quite a bit of oral history, and he has a new book that he's working on, but it's only going to have 1 person instead of 300 or 150 people. And that is John Cantor with his Broadway history, Chicago, all the famous plays that he's written. Mark, welcome.
Thank you. I've been here since about 11:30, working, getting everything set up, and I can't tell you how impressed I've been with this whole operation and everybody who's had anything to do with it. Deb, of course, and Jean and John, who've been an enormous help. And Christy, on her first day, has been absolutely amazing. So it's very comforting to have her helping us. So I appreciate being here, especially because I think that this enrichment series on your Mondays is just really impressive to me. So it's an honor to be a part of it. I appreciate the invitation. Thank you. So we're going to talk about oral history a little bit. This is something that I've been doing for a while, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how I ended up even doing it. But for the first time, really, I'm going to talk about how I do it, because this is what Deb and I decided to talk about. I usually talk about the books themselves at functions like this. So I'm really eager to share some of this with you. I want to share with you the things that I learned primarily from Studs Terkel. And I don't know how well you know him. A lot of you may have even met him. It's not uncommon for me to mention him in an audience. Somebody will say, he interviewed me. I saw him on the bus all the time. It spoke to his accessibility. He's a phenomenal character, I thought, and I'm excited to share some of what I learned from him. Oral history, if you're not familiar with it, really is just collecting the stories, the first-person stories of people. It could be around an event. There's a great oral historian from Belarus who did an astonishing oral history just on Chernobyl. So it could be an event like that. Or like Studs Terkel's working. It's all individuals talking about their work. Or the Good War, talking about their role in the war. I find that stuff fascinating. The oral historian from Belarus that I just mentioned, her name is I thought I could do it from memory, Svetlana Alexievich. She put it kind of poetically. She said, I believe that in each of us, there is a small piece of history. Isn't that a lovely thought? In each of us, there is a small piece of history. Together we write the book of time. We each call out our own truth. Whew, that's good. That's good. I think that's the essence of oral history, at least in the way that I like to do it. The two books that Deb mentioned are Ensemble, An Oral History of Chicago Theater. That's the one I interviewed over 300 theater folks, going back to 1952 up to the present. And then Working in the 21st Century, that came out to celebrate Studs's, the anniversary of Studs's book. For each, I had to find a different format because they're different. There's lots of different ways to do oral history. So in Ensemble, after talking to 300 plus people, I got the thought that what I'd really like it to feel like is that they're all at the same cocktail party. And they're all, they're all adding to the story. They're a story. So if you look, I don't know if you probably can't read it, but the first speaker on that page is Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and she's talking about her beginnings. And then the next person picks up where she left off from his experience. And the whole book is like that. And I've been at 2 occasions where it was read by different actors as if it was a play, which is really a pleasure, to see. Working is entirely different. I wanted to pay homage to Studs, and because it was the 50th anniversary book, I can't claim he had anything to do with it tried to follow his format, is what I meant. It followed his format. So each person, there's about 100 people, or there are about 65 people in there, and they each get their own chapter, which is distinctly different. The book I'm working on now is a year and a half of interviews. It says a year there, but it's grown. A year and a half of interviews with John Kander, the composer. And we would talk just about every other week, long talks. And if you don't know the name, you know his work. He wrote the music for Cabaret, which has been, is constantly being done. My wife Mary and I were just in New York. We saw it again there on Broadway. And then there's Chicago, which has been continuously running since 1996, continuously. And that doesn't count all the other places around the world that are constantly doing these shows. Those two shows were made into gorgeous movies, too, if you've seen Cabaret or Chicago. But those were his most famous, but there's a lot. He did a lot. So we had a lot to talk about. And the reason the format has to be different is because when we had our first conversation, he said to me, "I'll do this on one condition, that you are a participant. And for everything else I've done, I pull myself out except for a few questions. And you won't find my voice in Ensemble at all. So now I'm trying to figure out how do I make all these conversations, there's 30 plus conversations, into a book. Still trying to figure that out. But it's been a delightful experience. This is Pam Zeckman, who some of you may remember from Channel 2, previously from the Sun-Times and the Tribune. She's an investigative reporter with an astonishing career. Made a lot of change in this city and nationally through her investigative work. Some of you may remember she did this one series when she was at the Sun-Times where they bought a dive bar and they called it The Mirage. And they were investigating widespread accounts of corruption. And they were able to catch on film, because they had hidden cameras in this dive bar. They were able to catch people taking bribes or taking payoffs. It made a big difference. So that became a book called The Mirage, and it is now in process to be a movie too. But I've been sitting down with Pam every week, almost every week, talking about her work And that's a whole other form, because we're also including some of her colleagues. So that's what I've been doing so far. Where did this start for me, the idea of oral history? I think I could trace it back a long time. A long time. I've always been fascinated by people and the way people talk, and a great diversity of people, which is very much like Studs. I picked up my dad's copy of Division Street in 1966. It was a long time ago. I was a teenager. And my dad was fascinated by it. So as I did in those days, I saw him doing it, and so I picked it up and I started reading it. I couldn't figure out why I was so fascinated by these ordinary, so-called ordinary lives and the details of these ordinary lives. I think that's when the bug got me, because I just found that fascinating, and I wanted to figure out why. Why is this so interesting to me? As a kid, my whole notion of what you write books about is famous people, or heroes, or villains. This is a shoe salesman. This is the top shelf of our bookshelf. Those are all Studs Terkel books. He did all of that, by the way. He wrote all of that starting at the age of 55, which I find some real comfort in. But that's an impressive showing. I used to listen to him on WFMT a lot too, and actually had the opportunity to sit in WFMT with him and his guest through a whole live presentation, and that was really extraordinary too. As we continue to talk, you and I, you'll see that I just really think very highly of him, and has had a huge impact on me. And so you can imagine what it was like for me to get this voicemail.
Well, Mark Larson, this is Studs Terkel. I read your piece. It's very disturbing, and yet gotta have it in the book somehow. You yourself, your thoughts. So if you could call me, we can arrange sometime. No immediate rush on when we'll do it. It's for the book, and it'll take a while, but we'll set a time, pretty soon, when you're free and I'm free, we'll do it. Yeah, I think that has to be in it. Okay, great. Thank you.
I cut out a lot of his rambling too, but you get the idea. He could really talk a lot, but he really was a listener, and we're going to talk about that. He called me because I was a teacher at Evanston Township High School at the time. That's young me, and my students. And he wanted to talk to me for his book, Race. And I went. He gave me his home address on Castlewood Terrace, and I drove over there, and I was about a half hour early and sat in the car. And I just kept calling out to the powers that to be, please give me something interesting to say. I was just so nervous, and I was so worried that what do I have, when I think of all the people that he's interviewed. And yet, in that first interview, we did two. In that first interview, he made me feel very comfortable. I sat on his couch with him about 3.5 hours. I had no idea. The time went by very, very quickly. And I kept thinking, how did he do this? I'm a naturally shy person. I'm shy by nature. And he just was drawing this out of me. And I was having thoughts and feelings that I hadn't even tapped myself. Wow, that was fascinating to me. And then the book came out in 1996, and that was a strange experience. He gave me a fake name, which he did a lot, but he wanted to retain my Swedish heritage, so he called me Peter Soderstrom in Race. And then I had the unusual experience, Looking Glass Theater in Chicago, their first play in their new Michigan Avenue space a number of years ago, they adapted the book Race. So I saw myself portrayed on the stage too, which was something else. I'd love for you to know this woman. Her name is Sydney Lewis. Sydney was Studs' initial, oh no, there was somebody else who was the transcriptionist. She became very ill, and then Sydney took over for her. Studs met her when he was waiting at his table. And Studs, being Studs, said, "Do you want a job transcribing my stuff?" But she became a very close friend, was with him very near the end, and he credited her as co-writer of his final memoir, too. But she had you'll hear her voice at the end, but she had a beautiful way of talking about Studs and how he got people to talk. One of the things, this is her voice, one of the things that always amazed me about Studs was his eyes. His eyes were so intense. They were not like emotional, they were just so deep. I always felt that like part of how he I think it was part of how he connected with people was his gaze. That's how he did it, through his gaze. Look at his eyes. But it wasn't a sentimental gaze. I think there was a detachment, which surprised me. He would be totally present for your story, but he wouldn't get enmeshed in your story. He would be supportive of your feelings, but he wouldn't feel it with you. It was seeing, acknowledging, accepting, treasuring, celebrating the fullness of human experience in its highest and lowest form. She said that extemporaneously when I interviewed her for my book Working. I wanted her to be the prologue, part of the homage to Studs. She's talking about her work with Studs. But I think it's a really effective description of my goals, my goal, my dream as an oral historian. I want to do that. I want to embrace all of that. And that's the constant challenge. So let's talk a little bit about how it's done. These are some of the things that I learned by being interviewed twice by Studs, sitting in on his WFMT interview, and reading and listening to him well over time. And one of the first things I got from him is an incredibly simple, but really effective question. He said to me at one point, "I just want to know what it's like to be you." Isn't that lovely? That really touched me, one, and it also has always guided my conversations, the interviews that I do. What's it like to be behind your eyes? What's it like to feel with your heart? What's it like to walk in your shoes? And that has guided every conversation. For me, lots of oral history is about the recounting of something like Chernobyl. I'd like to catch people thinking out loud, because that's what Studs had done to me. Catch people thinking out loud, answering questions they might not have anticipated. So this is what when you communicate to your interviewee that you're there to see what it's like to be them, here's the kind of thing that you can get. Megan, I interviewed for my book Working. She's an ER nurse. She's the director of of ER, where she lives in Norwich. And I caught her near the end of the day. It was getting dark. She talked into her phone because she was out in Connecticut. She was about to go off to a midnight shift that when she woke up in the morning, she didn't know she was going to have to do. So this is her making time for me, actually. But again, she puts me in her shoes.
Like most people don't know what it's like to put a body in a shroud and zip that up. And there's a finality there. And the best text that I ever learned from before I was a nurse, instilled that is a sacred moment in somebody's life, or the end of their life, when you are sort of zipping them up to move on to their next place in their afterlife.
Can you explain what it's like to zip somebody in?
Before a family comes in to see their loved one that's passed, there is 10 to 15 minutes of cleaning that patient up so that we make them look like the very best that we can for those loved ones. So we will remove their valuables. So we make sure that patients' rings and things go home with their loved ones. We'll bag up their clothing. We make sure that we put a gown on a patient and warm blankets. We go to the blanket warmer and put warm blankets, not for the patient, but for the family, right? Because no one wants to come in and feel like their loved one is cold, even though you know they're dead. You don't want them to be in this cold, dark space. It's sad enough. Never mind adding the coldness of it. So you put a pillow under the patient's head. And again, this, for all intents and purposes, this is a dead person. They don't care if they have a pillow. They don't care if they're warm. But I'm going to walk their loved ones in. Sometimes I'm walking in a wife who has been married to someone for 60 years. And I don't want her to remember her husband in this, sterile room.
Can you feel the care? You could tell she was seeing all of this as she's describing it. That's what I'm after. That's what I'm trying to capture. And you get more sensitized to someone like in her position when you're in the hospital after hearing something like this, or when I was talking to her. Because later she talks about she'll walk away from someone who has just lost a child in one little cordoned off area, and then she goes into the next place, and the woman is screaming at her because she said she'd bring Advil for her son who had been injured and hadn't done it as quickly as she wanted. So she has to shift gears because this is a whole different case now. But it's a lot to carry, and you can sort of see it. Here's one more version of What's It Like to Be You. Nicole McBride is a police accountability advocate in Chicago, actually. And when we talked, it was not long after the murder of George Floyd. And I just wanted to know, what was it like for someone who's in the police line of business? What was it like for her, and as a black woman, to see that happen? Because we all saw it happen. And so that's what I asked her. I said, what was it like for you to watch that on TV? How were you personally affected by the killing of George Floyd?
So I guess that answer is two parts. You got your professional, you got your personal. The reality is that my husband is 6'2", 340. He's a big guy. And when you see those kind of things, and that, you can't help but to see your family, right? That at any given moment, what the George Floyds, the Phileo Castillos, all of these different things that have happened from coast to coast, every time you see it, oh God, I almost got emotional. Every time you see it, you can't help but to think, God, cover my brother, who again is 6'1" and 290, 280, so another big guy. At work, again, I think that that moment, especially that moment in time, that was compounded by the pandemic. So everyone was at home, right? Everyone saw it. I think that it had almost, please don't mistake what I'm saying.
Sure.
It had almost the same effect of what Emmett Till had in the 50s. Meaning, you couldn't ignore it anymore.
What's it like to be you? One of the things as I said, I like to capture people thinking out loud. And she was reliving just having watched it on TV, and she gave a lot, as you could tell. There's a guy named Paul Oakley Stovall, who's an actor. He was in the touring company of Hamilton. He played George Washington for a number of years. And I interviewed him, and this is what he said. You ask me these questions, Mark, and by answering them, I find the answers. And I loved that. I thought, wow, that's it. That's what we're talking about. It could change you to read oral history. It could change you conduct oral history too. And I wanted to share this little snippet with you. Stephen Schwartz is a composer and a lyricist. He wrote Godspell and Pippin, Wicked, which was out as a film last year, Wicked for Good, which is actually playing at the theater here in Oak Park at the moment. And now, right now on Broadway is a new play called Queen of Versailles, which he wrote. But what interested me was he wrote a musical version of Working. And that was about 4 or 5 years after the book first came out. He turned it into a musical. And I found that fascinating. And it's constantly being performed somewhere. So there's still great interest in it. So when my book Working came out, I did a conversation, a live conversation with Stephen at the Museum of Broadway. And one of the questions I asked him was, do you remember the first time you read Working? And why did you want to write this? And his answer is very candid. And, I should credit the Broadway Podcast Network. This is where the recording came from.
If I had to pick one, I would say.
Do you remember your first impression of it?
Probably the main adversary. That's the thing that we fight against the most. People say,
I do. I mean, I read it wasn't a review even. I think it was just an announcement like Book of the Month Club or something like that. And it described what the book was, and it had little excerpts from it. And one of the excerpts was from a telephone operator whom Stud calls Heather Lamb. It's not actually her name. This was in the day when there was such a thing as a telephone operator, and this was the telephone company was only Bell Telephone. It was a monopoly, and it was really annoying a lot of the time. And I was one of these people who would vent my frustration with the phone company on some poor telephone operator that I was talking to. If you couldn't get through to something or something would happen, and I would be like, look, you people are a monopoly, and you should, blah, blah, blah. This poor, usually woman who had, nothing to do with the running of the telephone company. And then in this description of the book, there was an excerpt from the operator, and she said, sometimes you get somebody on the line and they say to you, how's your day been, operator? Has it been a tough day? You're so thankful for these people. And I was like, oh my God, that is not me. She's talking about, but it made me realize that every day we have a whole bunch of connections to people that we sometimes, well, I'll speak for myself because maybe none of you do this, that I was not really thinking of as people. I was thinking of them as their functions. They were the parking lot attendant. They were the waitress. They were the telephone operator. And I suddenly thought, wait, we all are connected in this way that has been kind of heretofore invisible to me. I'm really interested in that, and I'd like to explore that theatrically.
And that's what he did. But can you see how it changed him? And I love the idea that he tries not to see each person as a function, a parking lot attendant, whatever it is, but as an individual. And Studs was brilliant at that. It's about individuals. It's not about a cop. It's not about, a waitress. It's about a human being who is a waitress or a cop and an individual. A lot of times when I talk to people, especially people who are trying to do oral history themselves, they always want to know, where do you even start the conversation? And I think they over-worry it, So I'm going to give you a couple thoughts on where to start. The first time I talked with Studs on his couch, he strangely, for somebody whose whole life has been a tape recorder, he kind of fumbled with it and then slapped it around and cursed it. And it was like he had never seen a tape recorder before. And then after a while, we got started. But I later read somebody was writing about Studs Terkel. He did that all the time. And the reason was because he did have a sense, he had a sense that he was a celebrity and he could make people nervous. So he just wanted to be on the same level. And maybe they'll even help him with it. But I thought that was an interesting thing. And then right after that, right after all that fumbling, the first thing out of his mouth was, "Who are you?" And I thought it was disarming, for one thing, but it's such an interesting question. And does he mean me? Who am I as a professional, as a husband, as a father, as a son, as a person? What does he mean? And then I caught on to the fact that my choice, I see now, whatever I chose would give him a lot of information in the first minute. You see what I mean? It's kind of a genius. The other thing is, if you read Working, you'll see that he used that question a lot, because the first sentence might be, "I'm an engineer for Amtrak," or something. So they're responding to that. What I tend to do, though, I use something different. I do it a little differently. I've never asked anybody that question because I was so thrown off by it. But we start, just with some chit chat, and you try to keep that short, but at the same time, you're gathering a lot of information. You're just, what do I want to come back to? Excuse me, or ask more about later, just as you're chit chatting. And then I'll slip in a question like, "Where'd you grow up, Ken?" I can't tell, I just fell into that. I can't tell you how that takes people back immediately. And they're pretty comfortable, and they tell you these stories. Most of it I can't use, because I'm there to talk about Working, but or whatever the topic is. But it really loosens people up, and there are all sorts of things that you can pull in later. So I found that an interesting question. And the other thing is, if we're doing it in person, you might comment on something that they have with them. Maybe they have a book. "Oh, let's talk about that book that you brought with you," whatever it is. And one time I interviewed the actor Michael Shannon, who, if you don't know who he is, he's a youngish man, but he's made 1,600 films and TV shows. Right now he's on screens in Nuremberg. He's also in yes, that's a great movie, or a great series, Death by Lightning. He even played Elvis once in Elvis and Nixon. But I interviewed him in this little office in the Red Orchid Theater on Wells Street, which is a 88-seat theater that he helped found. And we sat up there with some of his cast and a director, and what's so interesting about him is he's on Broadway, he's in film, he's on TV. He loves to come back to the Red Orchid Theater, where he continues to direct. He's directing something that will open fairly soon at Red Orchid right now, and he continues to act. Tickets now go like that when Mike is in a show. But while we were talking in this little office that he knows so well, I noticed a photograph behind him. And that's Mike, and then that's to his, let's see, on your right is Guy Van Swergen, who founded the company. And that's them very young. So I was really curious about, what does he see after all this that's happened? What does he see when he sees that? And Michael just really opened up.
A lot of times I think that I don't even know who that is.
Oh, really?
And yet I know that we probably we have a lot in common, I guess. But my life was so different back then. There's so much that, everybody, 20 years goes by, everybody has a lot of stuff happen, but I had a lot of stuff happen.
Yeah.
Like, but I think I'm a intrinsically very nostalgic person. I'm kind of riddled with it, nostalgia. I think I find it comforting somehow. I guess without it, life just seems too chaotic, too random. Because I mean, the thing of it is that I was not a person that was on the fast track to success. Really, I mean, I was like a barely functional person, and I found this this devotion that is in and of itself, as we were saying earlier, somewhat elusive and bizarre, but I was devoted to it no matter what. And then all this other crazy stuff happened. But yeah, it just seemed, in a strange way, I feel safe here somehow.
Here?
Yeah. This is like my den, you know.
But you can see what happens if you let him go back. You know, I didn't know if I would use that or not, but wow, and then now he's kind of more open, and we continue the conversation. A word about preparation. People worry about that too a lot. I'll start with a quick story. I interviewed Alan Arkin, who, like Studs, just meant the world to me. I thought he was a great actor. We lost him not that long ago, but I try not to get starstruck because of the people I talk to, but Alan Arkin, I was really nervous about it. So I started digging around, interviews with Alan Arkin, and at one point he had, somebody had contacted him and said, "Can I interview you on the red carpet for such and such a movie?" And Alan said, "That's fine, but tell me what the questions are." And so the person sent him a question like, "Did you enjoy working with this director? Was this movie special to you?" I'm making these up, but you know, there were 3 questions. Alan Arkin meets up with the reporter, and the first question the reporter asked was, "Did you enjoy working with this director?" And Arkin said, "I don't want to talk about it." So it was a total setup. So not only am I nervous because this is a hero to me, I thought, what's he going to do to me? He agreed to the interview under a condition, and that is that I first read his memoir and not ask him about anything that's in it. Now, this was for my book Ensemble, because he started at Second City here in Chicago. And so I needed to talk about things that had happened, and it's all in the book. So I'm weaving and dodging around trying to get firsthand account, because I don't want to just quote the book. This is oral history. And then finally I said, "Alan, I'm sorry. I've got some things I want to ask you, and I know they're in the book." And he said, "That's okay. You've done your homework." And I can't tell you how much I relaxed after that, but it was a great conversation. I really liked him. I was working on a book about Ed Asner at one point, spent a lot of time talking with him and to his colleagues, his family, and his friends, and that book it has yet to come about. I'm still working on it. But it was a real treat to work with Ed. It looks like he's punching me in that picture, but he's actually trying to feed me a dog biscuit. Life with Ed. But one of the people I talked to was the actor Austin Pendleton, who had been in a film with Ed. And the way he talked about Ed's preparation is so well suited to oral history, I thought. This is what Austin said. Ed brought a whole lot of information to the role. Read information as background and research and that kind of thing. He brings a lot of that to the role, but he combined that with being really open. When you play a scene with him, he's wide open. That's the best way to use that information. That's the best way to use that research and preparation. Do the preparation and then stay wide open. I thought that's exactly a great approach to oral history. Do your homework, but stay open and see where they want to go. And that requires some really intense listening. Studs, a friend of mine actually, Eric Simonson, made a documentary about Studs called Listening to America. If you're into Studs, you ought to check it out. It's really good. But in it, he said, people say I'm an oral historian, but I'm not a historian. I just ask people questions. That's Studs. And this is a great little cartoon. It's the New Yorker. If that's Studs Terkel, there are a few things I'd like to get off my chest. The first time I saw that was in his like guest bathroom on the first floor. The wall was painted red, and this was Scotch tape to the wall. And I said something about this. The first time I saw it, I said something. He said, well, I guess that means I've made it. I was in the New Yorker. This is what Studs says. What I bring to the interview is respect. That's really true. I know from having experienced it. The person recognizes that you respect them because you're listening. Because you're listening, they feel good about talking to you. It could be that simple. Don't worry about your list of questions. Just listen and see where that takes you. I'm going to share with you a quick example here of me being very bad at my job. I don't share it with any pride, probably the opposite. But this is what can happen if you're so focused on, this is my topic, these are my questions, and you're not listening. Listening for clues that they're giving you about what they want to talk about. This was a podiatrist I talked to for my book Working.
I've been in Minneapolis now since 2000 and, let's see, when did I move here? 1999.
1999. Wow.
Yeah. And I don't know if you enjoy writing books, but you may want to write a book about my life story since that time.
Since you came up there?
Well, the reason I came up here, everyone tells me it's a story that needs to be told, and maybe I might do it one day.
So there's quite a story behind this, huh?
It's a story that you would not believe.
Really?
Yeah, I had PTSD for about 10 years. I couldn't talk about it for 10 years.
Were you in the war?
No, I was actually, yes, but not in what you would think, not the manner you would think. I was down in Mississippi. I left Chicago and moved to Mississippi. And that was the beginning of the journey that I'm talking about. And it takes quite a while for me to tell you the story. As a matter of fact, like I said, it's a story that can be written about. And so I don't have a lot of time. I don't want to use our time just for that.
I'd like to hear it sometime. I need to, hear about your work. That's kind of what we're doing.
Yes.
But you've really piqued my interest, and I don't mean to sound like I'm prying, but let me ask you this: what took you to Mississippi?
I was practicing in Chicago. I was very successful for 3 or 4 or 5 years, and then managed care came and pretty much decimated my practice. After I had moved down there, and I lived there for 6 months. One day I went to the bathroom, and this became my ritual. Every morning I would go to the bathroom, get ready to brush my teeth and shave and everything. I'd look in the mirror, and I would say, "This is the United States of America. This is the United States of America. This is the United States of America." I felt like I was in a different country.
What I ended up doing, you could see how I was fumbling, and I was too obsessed with what I thought I wanted. And it taught me, listen to where the story they want to tell. And so what I decided was, he wants to tell this so bad. I'll let him tell it, and then I'll set up a second interview for working. And I never did the second interview. What ended up happening, what happened in Mississippi was he was hit with rampant racism from the minute he stepped foot. And his father kept saying, don't go down there, don't go down there. But he went, and they did everything they could to run him out of town. And he told me this in excruciating detail. It cost him a fortune in lawyer fees and everything else. And he finally came back to Chicago and lost a lot of money. And I thought, you know what? That's him trying to work in Mississippi. It does fit my theme. So I show that, again, not with pride, but some real humility. It taught me a lesson. I want to share one thing with you about Ed. One of the other things I found about listening is that a pause, silence is a question. And you could let it go on a while, and they will try to fill it. And I don't know if you know this, but when Ed was Lou Grant on the Mary Tyler Moore Show, and then he was Lou Grant in a 1-hour drama series where he played the same character but not comedically. And during that time, while that was on the air, it was a hit show, and he started speaking out against Reagan and his policies in Central America, and CBS canceled the show. But they canceled the show, and it was hard for him to get work after that. So I asked him if he felt like he had been blacklisted, because if you look him up, there are different articles that talk about him being blacklisted. And he paused, and I just let him pause, and then he came up with the most candid response. I could not have anticipated this.
I have the feeling that I'm not worthy enough to be a blacklisted actor, to be identified thusly. So I'm a poseur.
Is that a new feeling for you, or have you always felt that way?
I don't know.
I don't know why.
I realize that the stances I've taken are not usual stances, and that I brought my own blacklisted severity. I guess I'm running most of the time concerned that they'll find out I'm a phony. I don't know.
There's even a name for that, imposter syndrome. It seems like it's something that might even come with a lot of adulation. It's, you wonder, am I worth all of this?
Yeah, every time I get an honor, I wonder, why me? Oh boy, are you misguided?
Yeah.
Are you a dummy?
It's so interesting. I love it when he says, after a pause, I don't know. I mean, that's very candid. That's really honest. People want to fill space. But I think a pause is really an important thing. I gave a talk like this, similar to this. I was talking about the book and talked about Ed at the Chicago History Museum. And then during Q&A, I said, I think silence is a good question. And a guy raised his hand and he said, well, I use that in my profession too. I asked what it was, and he said he's a detective. I'm almost done. Just a few words about, it's very important to try to find the story within it. Sometimes you're trying to find the story as they're talking, and sometimes you're trying, but mostly you're trying to figure it out after the fact when you get the transcript. It's when you get the transcript that you begin to do the real work. There's a lot of work there in terms of editing and so forth. One of the things I found in terms of finding the story, this is one thing that works for me, is I want to find a first line as I go through the transcript, and I want to find a last line, right? I want to find a first line and a last line. And I don't know if you can see it from there, but at the beginning of each chapter, there is a little pull-out quote that I feel like introduces what this is going to be about. And in this case, this was a doula, and she said, it's hard for me to read it. I'm sorry, I can't read it so small, but it's something along the lines of, is this who I'm meant to be? And I thought, well, there's a good theme. I've got my theme. And one of the first things she talks about is her son, as a child, asking her, who are you, Mom? Studs' question. Who are you, Mom? And she goes, I'm your mom. See, I'm vacuuming. Leave me alone. And then the son persisted with it. And then she said, I started to think, well, who am I besides his mother? And that becomes part of the piece and why she went into being a doula. And then the piece ends with, it goes back to that question. And I said, so it begins and ends with a question asked by a 6-year-old. And she goes, my son is always taking credit for my journey. So I like that as an ending then. And it works too because she gave me the word journey. So from that first sentence to that is her journey. Perhaps at another time I'll talk, I know I'm running over and I'd like to hear your questions. We could talk about editing. Just for fun. That's what my manuscript looked like for Ensemble. I promise you that those are double-sided pages. So the thing is, how do you organize all that? What do you do with all of that? And I have to have it in front of me. My daughter took this picture of me at my desk. That was my view of the world for about 4 years. That's all the different pieces of Ensemble. These are the pieces of working with a little help. But I want to end the way we began with Studs. This is something he said in his memoir. To be remembered, isn't that what it's all about? And there's Sydney again, and I've circled it in yellow. Studs Terkel with Sydney Lewis, the woman he met as a waitress, became his transcriptionist, became his close friend, became his co-author. And so I asked her near the end of the interview I was doing with her about that question. I said, is that something you used to worry about? And this is what she said.
When we were working on the book, a lot of the time, he would say that. Do you think I'll be remembered? Do you think they'll remember me? Do you think I'll be remembered? It really mattered to him to be remembered, hugely. I think it comes from, way down, way deep, wanting to matter. I think he really wanted to matter. And I think that's what he's saying when he's saying, I want to be remembered. I wanted to have made a difference. All the books, so much is about people doing something, feeling like they matter, like they count, like their existence is for something. And I think he's like everybody else. He wanted to matter.
I think that's so true. I think you go into an interview assuming they want to be heard and they want to matter. Thank you so much.
Hi.
Hi.
I do the same thing, actually, but not on quite a level. I interview my own family.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
What got you? Oh, yes, your question.
I've done my dad and my mom, but I often found it difficult to get them to open up and relax. And of course, that was me at the beginning, and I'm still shy and I have a hard time asking my own parents what to ask. But I was just wondering do you record it on a video, or do you do video? How do you go about doing those? Because there's a lot of information to save. How do you save all of that?
Yeah, it's most of working, actually all of working was done during COVID. And for me, if there was a silver lining, it was that I captured it all on Zoom. So it's a little, it's kind of hazy, and but we all got used to that. And so I have those recordings. Mostly what I do is audio recordings. We'll sit in a coffee shop, we'll sit at their home, and I'll record it. And I always have at least one backup. Because I've lost, I don't know if you know the actor Paul Rudd. He was just in Only Murders in This Building. It was hilarious. But I had a great interview with him. He was super comfortable. It was during COVID. He's sitting on the floor, and I finished it, and I went to get the Zoom recording, and it didn't take. So it was all gone. So I made up some stupid reason. I'd like to do a follow-up, Paul. So I did that. But that's what I do. And then it's transcribed. And like I said, that's when the real work begins. That's really hard. It's a really good thing that you're doing it, though. It's really important that you're doing it. You'll be glad.
I don't know if I missed this, but who's that woman in the picture?
Oh, that's Val Gray Ward. She was a kind of an influential theater maker in Chicago in the 70s, and then throughout the rest of her life. But she's a fascinating person. We lost her fairly recently too, but it's one of my favorite interviews. That's why I use it.
I was wondering about the foot and ankle doctor that left Chicago. Why did he go to Mississippi?
He had a buddy down there who said, "Oh, you ought to come down here. It's cheaper. It's cheaper here." He did have this problem that I can't decipher, with healthcare changes, and so he was losing money in Chicago. So he said, "I'll give it a try." And his father actually was a civil rights. He was a minister, but he worked a lot in civil rights and was an activist. And he said, "Do not go down there. Do not go down there." But he did, and he regretted it. That chapter is in the book. I mean, he goes into incredible detail. You'd be amazed.
2 questions. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, first. Second, what were you teaching at Evanston Township? And then I may have missed this, but what was the piece or interview or whatever that Studs heard that led him to leave you that voicemail message?
Great. Nobody's ever asked me that. I taught English at Evanston Township High School for 14 years. Loved it. I just loved it. But what happened was we were going through a period at the high school. A kid had been shot. A gun went off in the cafeteria. Kids were starting to run through the halls and it was becoming really aggressive. I was getting cursed out. I just didn't know what to do with it. And I wrote something, a statement about what I think is going wrong and urging the administration to do something about this, and I'll help, I said. Well, what happened was the faculty got hold of it and spread it around, and about 150 people signed it and then brought it to the board, and then it got into the newspapers, and it was a whole thing that I didn't anticipate. So and then he wanted to talk about for his book, Race.
Very interesting presentation.
Thank you.
I was wondering if Stephen Schwartz said why he chose to go with multiple composers for working rather than composing the entire score himself.
We didn't talk about that. We were talking about the book itself, but what she's referring to is the fact that James Taylor and others contributed songs to it. And along the way, more have done so. I wish I could answer that for you. I don't know. May I ask why you ask? Why that's a curiosity for you? For the people at home, she said that she's seen the show a number of times and really enjoyed it. It is a curious thing. I'm not sure why.
Well, this is a frivolous question.
Oh, good.
Do you know approximately how many red and white check shirts Studs Terkel had?
Oh, that's so good. Two things on that. One is, yes, he did. He wore red and white check shirts all the time and a jacket and red socks. And that just was his shtick. That's who he was. And when I went over to his house, he answered the door and he's in a red and white check shirt. I thought, God, he wears his costume at home even. That was my first thought. Then recently, Mary Schmeek and Melissa Harris created a podcast, which is quite wonderful, called Revisiting Division Street. And they went and hunted down people who are the descendants of some of the people who were in Division Street and interviewed them. It's a wonderful podcast. But we went to the launch of that at the Harold Washington Library, and there were a lot of people there. And on every table was like a bouquet of roses, it looked like, cloth roses. And at the end, Melissa said, I want all of you to take one with you, one of those roses with you. And it turns out they were wrapped up red socks, which was such a great touch. And there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people there. And it was Melissa's mother who, for weeks and weeks and weeks, were rolling these things. But I have them in my little pencil holder. But I don't know why. I think, you know why? He didn't want to think about what he's going to put on. He's got other things on his mind.
There was a famous journalist from the Sun-Times. I'm going blank on his name, Alan Green, something. He's gone for a while. But
Bob Green?
Yes. But he wrote a book, and we bought a couple of them for our parents, about eliciting questions for their oral history for your family.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Just Google Bob Green.
I just wanted to ask how you got some of your sources, like for the nurse that was at the beginning, was she on the East Coast somewhere, or just various sources that you wouldn't necessarily have a relationship with?
Yeah, I wanted the book to have sort of a national reach. If you look at Studs Terkel's working really carefully, you could tell he stayed in this radius. There was no Zoom. He wouldn't have a clue how to record a telephone conversation. So it was pretty close to home. I wanted it to be more nationwide. So I would ask people, do you know somebody who might do this? Or that I should talk to? And I'm embarrassed to say this, I'll say that in the beginning. Facebook was such a great tool for me. I would literally post, I'm working on this project, does anybody know a chef? And I would get all these responses. So that's how I got more reach, is through social media. And plus people suggesting people to talk to.
You've, I'm sure, done in-person interviews as well as on Zoom. Do you lose anything without doing the personal interviews?
Oh, that's a great question. I hated at first having to use Zoom, but it was way better than a phone call, and it was COVID. Whenever possible, I traveled. I traveled to see Ed. I've traveled to different places, but I much prefer being in person when I'm able, because there's a nuance that comes out. There's an interpersonal response that you can pick up on more. It really is more. It's as much more personal as you would expect. To sit there with the person, and have a coffee, or be in their home. I love that. Yes, it is different. Thank you. You're lovely.